This tutorial is brought to you by InformationAnalyticsInstitute.com.
Hello and welcome to another Information Analytics Institute video tutorial. My name is Dmitry. Today we will take a look at an example from Chapter 9 of our course. And in this video I will show you how to configure list view both as a display and control object to make it control the values displayed on a column chart like this one right here. Remember, you can download step-by-step instructions and files for this dashboard at our website. The link for that is in the description below. Okay, what I have here is a pre-built dashboard. It has a blank canvas, but it has a pre-built spreadsheet with some sample tables and data in order to speed up development in this video. Okay, let's start with reviewing the settings of the object. It's worth noting that all objects in Xcelsius can be divided into two functional groups. Those would be the display objects, like charts for example, which are used to actually display data for it to be analyzed. Those include charts, like these, grids, or gauges. And you have your control objects, which are the objects that can insert data into the spreadsheet and control other objects. That would be like selectors, like combo box, label-based menu, or a radio button. A list view object, which we are going to review today, is a special kind of object because it can be both called a display object because it displays data in a two-dimensional table, as well as it can be used as a controlling object because the rows in this object can be selected and the data can be inserted into the spreadsheet and control some other object or logic in the spreadsheet. So let's add a list view. It's here under the selectors twig in the components window. I'm gonna drag it to the canvas like so and just stretch it a bit like so. Okay, let's connect it to some sample data. I'm going to connect the title cell to the A21 cell. I hit the sales by month. So there's the title of the list view. And I'm going to connect the display data to this range right here. So I'm going to display these together with the name, with the label, the column headers, the row headers, and the data like so. So you can see here that it just took all the data and inserted it into the cells the same way as it is displayed on the spreadsheet in Xcelsius. Let's set the widths of the columns. You can see here that some of the words don't fit, and in order to fix that I'm going to set the widths of the columns. You can do that by clicking this button right here, which is Configure Columns. And you can manually enter with your keyboard the widths of each column in pixels. So I'm going to enter 150 using the keys on my keyboard, and then I can use the Enter key to save that setting and get immediately to the next cell below that. So I'm going to set the first column to be 150 pixels wide and all other columns to be 100 pixels wide, like so. We're done. Now I click OK, and you can see that the column widths are set, except for the last column appears to be bigger. But that's just because that the column widths do not actually control the widths of the object itself for this particular component. So if I manually change the widths of the object, you can see I can shrink it down until the size of the previous column, and you can see the scroll bar appearing. So if I make it just a bit wider, the scroll bar disappears, and now you can see that the widths of this November label is the same as the October. Now it's worth noting that there are two ways to set up headers for the list view. The first one is working right now. By default, if you choose the display data, the first row would be considered as the header row, and you can see it is working like that right now. If you want to do it the other way, you can go to Configure Columns, and the second option to do that is to bind column headers to specific cells. If you do that, let's do that right now. We're gonna select the column headers to be this row right here. You can notice that column headers changed to the references to the appropriate cells. And if I click OK, you can see that the headers now became connected to this row, but the data now contains the headers as well. That is because if you choose that option, if you in configure columns you do select bind to column headers, the whole display data range is now considered to be the data. So since we selected the display data together with the headers, now the headers became data. Now to fix this, we would have to reconnect the display data just to the data that is that has to be displayed without the column headers. To do that, I'm going to connect the display data to the proper rows, to the proper cells right here, and the settings for the headers would be lost, and for the column widths as well. Unfortunately, this is the way this particular component works in Xcelsius. So I'm going to go back to configuring the columns, bind to the column headers again, like so, and set the column widths again to 150 for the first column, and 100 for all other columns using the number keys on the keyboard and the enter key. Now if I do that, now you can see it's set up like that again, but now the column headers are taken from a separate row. Okay, let's continue. Now we will get to the data insertion. The insertion types are common for most of the objects in Xcelsius, and we have a video about that which covers all of them in great detail, and the link to that video is in the description below. We will use row insertion type for this object, and what that would do, it would insert the data from the source data, the appropriate row, into the destination row. So if you have 5 rows in this object, let's say 2 rows in this case, in this object, we would select these 2 rows as the source data, and we can select a single row as the destination. So whenever one of these 2 rows is selected, the data from an appropriate according row would be inserted into the destination row with the same amount of columns. So this is the insertion type we'll use for this object today. And there are 2 other options remaining on this tab. It is clear destination when no selected item. What this basically does, it clears the destination cells, in this case row, from all the settings when there is no selected item. The no selected item state can be a default state when the dashboard is launched, or it can be controlled by another object to not to have anything selected on the object. And when that state happens, the destination cells would be empty. The second setting here is insert on, and this setting controls either the object would be inserting the data on interaction with the object, so when you select another row in the list view, the data gets inserted, or on both data change and interaction. So the data, if the data gets updated in the source data, it would be inserted and updated in the destination, even if you didn't choose anything on the list view. Both of these are covered in more detail, and if you have problem understanding one of these or are interested in how do they work precisely, you can go to those videos and take a look. The link is in the description below for both of these. The next tab is Behavior tab. Now here you can select which item is selected by default when you first launch the dashboard. So I can choose either row 1 or row 2 because we have 2 rows selectable currently, or you can have no selection at all, so nothing is selected. The next setting is Ignore blank cells. If this is turned on, if this is selected, the component does not display blank cells past the last non-empty header. This option is useful when the amount of data in the component varies. To display this, you can see we have 2 options here: to ignore cells at the end of the range for in rows and for in columns, so for rows and columns. To demonstrate that, I'm going to delete the data from a row and the data from the column. Now notice that they disappear immediately, but these cells are not ignored. They are still displayed, they are just empty. If I shrink the size of the object, you can see that this scroll bar appeared, the vertical scroll bar appeared, because this row, the second row here, is even though it is empty, nothing is displayed there, the place is actually reserved and the row actually is functional. You could actually click on it, even though it doesn't have any data. And the same goes with this column. If I shrink the object horizontally, you can see that the horizontal scroll bar appears, meaning that this column this object, the space for that column is also reserved. If I check these two options, you can see it's not anymore. Now the object thinks it has just 4 columns instead of 5, and just 1 row. And you can see if I shrink it even further, nothing happens. And also the divider before the 5th column disappeared because the 5th column is not displayed on this object now at all. Let's turn these back on. Let's actually enter the data back, like so. Just some numbers, like that. The last setting on the Behavior tab is Dynamic Visibility. What this controls, it controls either the object is visible or is not visible on the canvas of the dashboard. Now, there is a status field which can have a formula and point to some cell on the dashboard, and a key field. And when the status and the key field match, when the numbers or values in them match, the object is visible. In all other situations, it is suppressed and is not visible or clickable on the canvas of the dashboard. That works when the dashboard is running. Now, the next subtab here is Animation and Effects. For this object, we have the type of the animation, let's say it was fade in, and the duration of that animation effect, let's say it was 4 seconds. Now, if we preview the dashboard, you can see once the dashboard is launched, the object is appearing slowly for 4 seconds, so it's fading in. But for this particular object, the designers of Xcelsius decided that the text should be visible immediately, and only the transparency of the graphic parts of the object is fading in this case. Okay, the last tab for the settings of this object is Appearance. It has 3 subtabs. The first subtab is Layout, and here you can check or turn on and off the grid lines of the object and control their color. You can see these grid lines, both vertical and horizontal, between all the rows and the header of the list view, and I can just uncheck them. So these are controlling the horizontal grid lines, and this checkbox is turning on and off the vertical grid lines. Notice this does not affect the header. And you can control the color of those lines. So let's say I would choose black color, and you can see that those grid line colors became black, like so. Let's get back to the gray color though. I liked it better. Maybe slightly darker than the original, like that. And maybe the horizontal lines would be brighter than the vertical. For some reason I like that better. Let's go to the Text subtab. Here you control basically any kind of text that is displayed on the component, on the object, is controlled from here. You have the title text, you have the header text, and you have the labels color. Now you can enable and disable the text, so you can just hide the text like so, or hide the headers. You cannot hide the labels because this component would not work without them, so you cannot hide them even if you wanted to. Now you can change the font right here, the font size, the style of the font, the alignment, and the color. For something that you can move, like the title, you can also change the position. So currently it is in the top center, and I can, let's say, move it to the top left of the object, but I also want to offset it by one of the axes if I want it to make it to appear. Let's say I want it to appear higher. I will change the y-axis pixel offset like so. So you see that. And also for the objects that support that, like for the headers or labels in this object in the list view, you can change the format of the numbers. So I could display currency, for example, or percentages. And so this affects the way the number is displayed and its formatting. Another very important thing is that logically you perceive the first column in the list view for many usages of it as the row headers, but row headers are not distinguished programmally. They're not distinguished from any other column. So whatever format you set for the columns, that would apply to both the first column and all the other columns. And the last subtab here is color. On here you can control the colors of all basically everything on the list view. So anything that is displayed and can have a color, its color is controlled right here. And some of these colors overlap with the previous settings on other tabs. So you can set the background color for the whole object. You can set the colors for the header labels. For these, you can have the default over and selected color. And since you can click on the headers to sort the columns, which will be explained a bit later, you can have the color for when it's just displayed, when you hover over the label, and when you select it, when it's sorted by. You have the background and the same default color, hover over or just over color, and selected color for the background of that header cell, for that header label. You have the label font and label background color, same way, because you can control them in this object. You can select the rows. You can control the label color and the label background color for that selected row. You can see currently the label background for selected is gray, and this is this gray you can see here because the first row is selected by default. You have the grid line colors, which we have seen before on a previous tab. You have the sort symbol, that is a small triangle that appears next to the label of the header label, which is used to sort, and it can point either up or down, indicating the ascending or descending sorting. And you have the scroll bar. When you shrink the object too small to display everything at the same time, you would get the scroll bars, and you can control the color of the scroll bar track and thumb color, the button color, and the button symbol color. So you can control the colors of all these pieces of the scroll bars. Okay, now let's get to the actual design of the list view and other objects in order to finish this task, in order to finish this dashboard. Okay, so let's create a new list view. Let's go to Selectors Twig and drag the new list view component to the canvas like so. Let's stretch it a bit like so. Let's go to Properties, and here they are, General Properties. Let's go to Display Data, and let's bind it to the data range. This time we're going to use this data range right here, like so. Let's go to Configure the columns and change the column width. So we're going to make the first column 170 pixels wide. I'm going to click on this column with cell, set it, and then use the Enter key to get to the next next row here, so the next column's widths, and set it to 110. I'm going to use the same keys to enter this from the keyboard like so. And now we're done. I'm going to stretch it even further to make all of them fit. And for some weird reason the scroll bar doesn't appear when it's supposed to. It still doesn't. Very weird. Okay, never mind that. Let's just deal with guesstimate the widths like so. Okay, now let's choose the insertion, actually set up the insertion of this object. So I'm going to go to this data insertion portion of its settings. I'm going to choose the insertion type row, and for the source data I'm going to connect to the selectable rows for the list view. So these will be these rows, and I select them as a range. And for the destination, and gonna point the destination to these yellow cells. Now for the source data, we're selecting just the rows again because the headers are not selectable. You cannot select the headers as the option on the list view, yet you can select each other row on the list view because they are selectable. And the destination, you can notice, has the same amount of columns, and it's the whole row. So whichever row would be selected on the list view, the same row data would be copied or inserted into the destination area. You may also notice that the source data here, so the source table, is colored green. These cells are colored green, and the destination cells are colored yellow. That is not technically necessary, but that is a color coding that we use for the cells that either provide the data for the object, so the green cells are the cells that provide the data to the object, or the cells which the object uses to get the data into it, and the yellow cells are the cells which receive the data from the object. So that's the place where the object inserts the data from the canvas back to the spreadsheet. So this is the color coding we use to help you to understand the data flow better. Now what we will also do is I'm going to select the row number 1 and copy its context. I right click and copy and paste special values, just the values, to these yellow cells. And I do that to provide the default data for this dashboard while it's not yet running. So in order for it to display something, in order for it to function properly in the design mode, not in the preview mode, I will insert this data to mimic as if the dashboard was running and the first row was selected in here. Once the dashboard is running, when it's launched and something is selected in the list view, by default, or the user selects it, this data is getting overwritten by that selection of the user. Now let's go to the Appearance tab, go to Text, and we're going to configure the header. Let's turn off the title, we don't need it at all. For the header, let's set it to, already have the font 14. Let's make it bold, so you can see all the headers became bold, and the size is already 14. Now you can see here that all the text now is left aligned by default, or left justified. I am not happy with that because I am used to the fact that in reporting the numbers are aligned to the right to make it easier to read them. So to do that, I want to make them all right aligned. But if I do that, if I click this align to the right, oh sorry, I have to do that on the labels. If I do that, you can see that everything got right aligned. The first row, the first column, the labels for the rows got right aligned as well, and I'm not happy with that, but I cannot control them separately. So there's a small trick to do that. You have to insert the appropriate amount of spaces after the label text to make it look or appear as if it's right justified. So you have to insert, in this case, for this width of this column, I need 45 spaces or 45 characters. So it's essentially 45 spaces minus the amount of characters I have right here. So it's 45 minus these, which in this case it's 8 characters, and I will just paste that, and in the end there is a dot to make it, to use those spaces to consider them. And if I enter this text, you can see it now appears to be left aligned. So this is the trick to make separate columns aligned differently in the list view object. Let's set the label font to 14. I want everything to be the same size, like so. Now also, let's go for the labels, let's set the number format to currency, and I'm going to change the amount of decimal places to 0, and I'm going to add a suffix. Since these values right here are in thousands, I just know that because I got it from the database. So these labels, these values are in thousands, so I'm going to add a suffix k, which would display that these are the thousands. Let's actually preview this dashboard right now. So I'm going to go and click preview, and you can see here that the first row is selected, and I can actually click on rows to select them. Since this is a control object, I can do that. As well as doing that, I can click on the headers to sort the table by the data in that column, like so. And you can see that triangle that shows the either a descending or an ascending flow of sorting displayed to the right of that header. You also have to remember that once you do that, you cannot sort the table into its original sorting state. So you cannot unsort, you cannot cancel the sorting. You would have to actually restart the dashboard preview. Another thing is that you cannot turn that sorting off, so you cannot prevent users from sorting the columns. And there's an interesting trick to prevent that. So to do that, I would have to add a background component. Take it from here. I'm going to use the background because it has round, square edges, the same way as the header of the list view. And I'm going to place that object right above the header of the list view, so their edges match, so it perfectly covers it, like so. There we go. And now in the settings of this background component, I'm going to make it totally transparent, like so. And I'm going to check this block mouse events checkbox, so it doesn't allow the mouse interaction underneath itself. It doesn't go through. Also, I'm going to make sure it's in the front. So I'm going to bring it to front, and I can check that by seeing that this object is further down on the list in the object browser, which means it's on top of the list view. You can see the background is lower. That means it's on top of the list view. And now if I preview the dashboard, you can see that the headers are not clickable. I'm clicking on them right now, and you cannot click on them anymore, yet all other rows in the list view are clickable and therefore selectable. Okay, now let's build an object to display what is selected on the list view, to actually control that. So let's add a chart. We'll use a column chart like this one. So I'm going to add a column chart object. I'm going to stretch it out approximately to the width of the list view, and let's now set it up so it displays the data selected by the list view. We have a video that covers all the chart settings and different permutations of using them in a very good detail, and the link to that video is in the description below. Okay, so let's go to the chart. Let's go to general properties. Let's select data by series. I'm gonna add a series. The values of this series I'm gonna bind to the output of the list view, so what is selected into these yellow cells without the header. The series name I'm going to bind to the New York, to this to the selected city, or selected in this case these are the divisions. And now the labels for the x-axis, so category labels X, I'm going to connect to these cells, so they will be displayed right here on the bottom, like so. That's good. Now let's go to the Appearance tab. I'm going to change the marker size here in the series to 50, so the columns are thicker, like so. Let's go to Appearance Text, and we'll uncheck a few displayed headers, displayed labels. So we're gonna uncheck the horizontal category axis labels, axis title, and the vertical axis title, like so. So the space for them is not reserved. I'm going to format the vertical labels, so these labels right here, and I'm going to format them to the same format. They're going to be currency with 0 decimal places and with a K suffix because we're displaying thousands. And also the same thing has to be done to the mouse over value, since we are they should be displayed in the same fashion. When we hover over the bar, the message appears with the number that this bar depicts, so I want that to be of the same format. So I'm going to choose currency, change the amount of decimal places to 0, and add the K suffix to show these are the thousands. Let's remove the title. I don't want it to be displayed, like so. And now let's actually preview the dashboard to see how this works. Now you remember that this chart is taking its data from the entered data of the list view. So now if I choose a different row on the list view, you can see that that data is inserted into the column chart. This is very useful for many different applications, and this is very intuitive and user-friendly in the way that the user, as he clicks on something, it is interactive. It changes the data display as the user clicks on something. Also notice the hover over values here. It's for the China, you can see here, because it's reading the X-axis label, but it also has the series name in it. When we pointed it to the Miami is now selected, so the series name is displayed first. So this number is 1,400,000 for Miami for China. Okay, let's go to the original dashboard from the book. There it is. And now you can see it's pretty much the same dashboard. It inserts data. It has a few more tools in order for this dashboard to be usable, but essentially we are using this logic just explained to make this dashboard work. This dashboard is from chapter 9 of our course book, and you can download the files as well as the step-by-step instructions for this dashboard, as well as 8 other beautiful dashboards from our website. The link to that is in the description below. I really hope this helps. Subscribe to our channel to get more tutorials like this one. Thank you for watching and good luck.
Here at Information Analytics Institute, we provide remote and on-site Crystal Dashboard Xcelsius training for people who want to start building interactive dashboards or seek to get better at it. The dashboards that are built during the training course cover numerous useful Xcelsius components, methods, and dashboard building techniques to get you started building dashboards in no time. We provide training for database and Lawson connectivity, where you can learn to connect dashboards to various data sources. We also provide audit and completion services, where we audit your existing dashboards for compliance with dashboarding best practices or complete any dashboard that you have remaining unfinished. For more information or to contact us, visit our website at www.informationanalyticsinstitute.com.